Okay, so I'm redoing the intro. This is a Bosion stereo installation in a, I believe there's a second generation, but it's more like the first plus. It's a early 90s Geo Metro convertible, but the hardtop and the convertible are going to have the same dashboard arrangement. So if your dashboard arrangement looks like this, we're going over installation on the stereo. As far as working on the little functions on that, it's going to be too long of a video. It's a pretty long video as it is on the just on the installation, but it's a hassle. It's tricky. If you're a professional installer, you may already know this. If you're not and you're curious about this, it's what they call a double DIN 2-slot thing, but it's a way of taking a older car, but one of these super fuel efficient Geos, and updating it. Okay, but I want to show you. Now, I've got this map on 3D view. It shows all my detail and stuff. That's that. And then this is it. This is the road, so it's the same color, which is kind of cool. But for navigating, I think that's pretty awesome. Stereo functions on it, pretty normal. It's nice to have a large touch screen, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's what the terrain looks like here. Here's what the terrain looks like on this. The thing about the map is it allows me to see over the next hill. When trees are blocking me here, I can look down at the GPS and see over the next hill, get my bearings very easily. This is good. My 4x4 will not accept a stereo in this size, but if you ever have one, oh, absolutely awesome for road trip type vehicles. Absolutely fantastic. So we're going to move on into the video and show you how I got this thing installed. It's a tedious video. I'm sorry, but it's a tedious process. And if I leave anything out, it's going to be important stuff that I leave out. And so I'm leaving it all in there. So good luck, folks. If you have questions, it's going to be, put it in the comments section. We'll try to answer them for you. Okay, stage one, removal of the old radio stereo assembly. You're seeing this part way through because I had to run through a lot of frustrating stuff to get to this point, and I didn't really want that on video. But basically, first things first, from what I can tell, you want to pop all the buttons off, the heating and air conditioning controls, and you pull them outward. It's a little sticky little tab. You want to be really careful with it because with age they may have become brittle, but they should come off without breaking. You need to pull all of those off. Next, there's some small Phillips head screws. They're going to be underneath, so you need to get low on this thing. You're probably going to be on your back in the footwell of this thing, looking at those screws. One is here, one here, one here. There's 3 total. You can see on this plate where those had been. Now they were hidden when it's all in place. There's one small electrical connection to undo. This is going to come out of the center right here, and it's basically for the dashboard indicator light when the vehicle's running. If you're going to have other electrical stuff that you want to install at this time, realize this is going to be a hot lead that works in conjunction with your dashboard lights. So if you're doing like any turbo boost gauges or something like that, you want to work them off of that. You will undo 4 screws for the radio, one here, 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 here. Now those go into the radio double DIN chassis adapter. That's just part of the OEM stuff on the car. I'll show more of that on the bench. The radio will still not come out until you get at a screw that's at the back of this. As far as I can tell, it's either not metric or it's a metric that's awfully close to 5/16. And this is the frustrating monster right here. It's going to be in the back of the radio chassis. It is not in the back of the radio itself. I'm going to show when it's on the bench where that goes, where it came from. But it's basically comes up from underneath here. I thought I had to remove the whole ashtray assembly to get at it, and to get the ashtray assembly off, you got to get the whole shifter boot assembly off, several screws on the sides. You do not detach anything from the glove box. I don't know why they talk about that in the forums. There's nothing on the glove box gets undone to get this thing out of there. But sometimes this screw is a Phillips head, other times it's the 5/16, possibly something metric. It's probably either metric or proprietary on the threads. Hang on to this. You're going to be using this to get the new stereo installed and tight, and it's a hassle because you're having to reach it from underneath out there. It's the only screw that's under there. You'll probably feel it before you see it. It's tricky to get at. It's the big secret on this. When you pull the radio out, there's enough slack in a radio wiring harness to undo this. And then look at which end this is. We're going to show you the wiring harness adapter here in a few seconds. And as we get the new radio wired in place and explain what's going on with that. Showing the outgoing and the incoming stereo components. Now what I did was I ordered a full entertainment system package from Amazon. I got a good deal on the car. I'm kind of budgeting this to be a $2,500 car. I'm about $2,200 bucks into it so far. I'm well within budget on this thing being a $2,500 economy car. One of the things I decided to budget into this is not a lot I can do to the motor on these things, but I can upgrade the stereo system, so that's what I'm going to do. Stock is basic GM stuff. Now these are relatively bulletproof. This one, the display went out on it, otherwise it does work. Tape player, you stick your little tape adapter in there, run it off the iPad, iPhone, other little device with a RF output, or not RF output, but just basic audio output. It's so-so and it's got to go. The speakers, because of the age of the car, were all trashed. So I bought a speaker kit from Amazon, the recommended one for the convertible. Wrong stuff. It turns out that later model convertibles took the same speaker setup that the hatchback would take. They're just mounted in different locations in the rear. The front speakers are 4-inch speakers. The rear are the 6.5s, also nicknamed a 6-inch. And you go in stock holes with those. The kit came with these 4x6 coaxials, and they're wrong. Okay, so that's all I can say is they're wrong. They don't fit. I bought this faceplate adapter kit because it was recommended. Now these things are like 30 bucks from the stereo stores, 10 bucks from Amazon. And as I got into looking through the instruction booklet, that for whatever reason doesn't match this car. I may use some of the screws out of it. Hope not. Don't know. Probably. I haven't popped it all open to I'm not sure if I'll return it or not. I bought this adapter cable for the plugs in the rear, hopefully so I don't have to individually wire all this stuff. You know, clipping and cutting and individually wiring stuff takes forever. It's a hassle. You really want to avoid doing that. When you get this, your color codes in theory match up with a lot of what's on stereos. In practice, probably not. And you don't want to be tracing wire diagrams on this all the time. So save the packaging, okay? And you want to save that because you get a guide on the back that tells you what these wires are, where they match up to the pins. Now, incoming stereo is a Bosion car entertainment system. Has a lot going on with it. DVD, CD, video CD, MP3 player. Has oh, this is the GPS program, your mapping program. You can pop that out, get it updated on a computer, pop it back in. That accesses your GPS program. Use a micro SD card for memory, and so you can put your music playlist on an SD card or whatever. And then of course it's Bluetooth and USB. Now on the back of this is a USB connector. I'm not sure how that's supposed to work, but I guess if you wanted to run like hardwire or USB into this, run it around to the front so that the other end of it's on a phone charging dock in your car or something like that, you could rig that kind of stuff up. I'm not sure if it's full interaction. I think it is. Over here, and this is usually the device side of an USB. So the other side would go to a computer, but then it comes with this. So you've got the computer side of a USB along with a little adapter, so it's kind of a reverse type thing. And so you wouldn't plug the other end of the cable into that. Not 100% sure what's going on. We're going to explore that more in a unit later. It's car stereo stuff, okay? About 130 bucks off Amazon. Look relatively comparable to similar looking stuff I saw at Walmart in a little bit more price, like 180 price range. Car stereo stores, you know, I'm not an aficionado on that stuff. I can't tell the $150 stereo from the $1,000 stereo when I really look at it. They make noise. I got bad hearing. This is going to work. This comes with its own faceplate, and from what I could tell, the way all these interfaces work on the factory faceplate, I'm going to be able to get this to work without the adapter. I've got some other screws and other stuff here that came with the radio. Not quite sure. I don't think I'm going to use that metal plate. I may end up using the screws out of that. We get a GPS antenna that we can relocate to a spot so there's less radio interference between the GPS and the head unit. Now, this has Bluetooth and a phone button with a microphone here. As far as I could tell, there's no remote microphone capability on this. So I kind of wanted one of those little voice pickup microphones on the sun visor. Doesn't appear to have that, but they assure me that this is good enough to pick up my voice, have a conversation with that while I'm driving. We'll see. The other external device I have on here, I may not install in the car. It's around a box somewhere, is a rear camera. Has a backup camera. Those are kind of nice for parallel parking. Also will act as a de facto rear view mirror under some circumstances, but generally it's not activated unless you have the car in reverse. So more on to some of this wire adapting and the factory faceplate adapter. As soon as I get this stuff all cleaned up, I'm going to take this into the house, wash it up in the sink, and bring it back out. We'll continue the video in a bit. Alright, back on the business side of the installation. That's going to be on the back of the radio. Now, we've got this wiring harness adapter, which has the radio side. This will be the side that plugs into the automobile wiring harness. If we're going to use all the same speakers and hookups as what were originally in the car. I'm not using the same speakers, but I am using the original speaker wiring. And so, yeah, I want all these to be in the same place. This is the end which would, in theory, plug into the back of a car stereo, but not this one. This one has basically a different style plug. So I don't know if this is relatively standardized or not, but not standardized with this radio, that's for sure. What we do get is a great big hairball of wires, which are fortunately labeled. We also have another label on the top of the radio that kind of tells us what these are and where they go. They're relatively self-explanatory labeled in English, which is a good thing. What we're going to have to do, though, is we're going to have to do some clipping on this, break out the wire crimpers and cutters, and go to town on that bad boy. We have the radio chassis adapter, very tight fit to the original radio. We've got several different holes in this. We only had a few holes in the side of the factory radio, and you can kind of tell where the dirt is versus where it's not, you know, which holes it was using. And we're going to hope that with a large number of holes in the side of the aftermarket radio, one set of these is going to line up. And from what I can tell, it will. From what I can tell, there's one set of these that will line up. What it does is it mounts the aftermarket stereo a little bit more forward. That's going to give us room for our trim bezel on the mounting surface plate and all that kind of stuff. That's again going to give us a little bit more room on that trim bezel. The flexibility of our stuff in the back isn't really going to be a problem. You can tell, even though this took a trip through the sink and got washed, the factory stereo comes back to about here. The aftermarket one's probably going to come out to about here. It's going to stick out the front a little bit. We want to kind of bend and straighten these tabs out a little, and probably look at using original screws on this. not the end of the world if you don't. These threads are relatively standardized on this stuff. And the other thing that happened on this Bosion stereos is some shipping screws come out of the DVD player. A lot of labeling here says to remove them. So next is going to be adapting this wiring harness. It's a hassle. It's done manually. This is probably going to take the most time of the installation. So in prepping the wiring harness, I got this little kit from Harbor Freight. Got a relatively standard cable crimper stripper thing here, and our guide for the harness right here. Now, part of what I'm doing is I got these little things of heat shrink tubing, and I cut them into thirds to get the size I need. You run them down the wire before you do your little twisty connector on that. I really don't want to use wire nuts on this. Some people do. Other people like to use these little pinch connectors. I find they never really hold right. I just want to do a twisty splice and then have it closed up under the heat shrink tubing. You could use electrical tape on that. I don't like it. It doesn't work well over time. I really prefer to heat shrink stuff outside the car. When you're under the dash, you really don't want to be kind of screwing around with a heat gun or a little torch to warm that stuff up. So this is a luxury I'm going to take to use this stuff right now. On this side, I could run the heat shrink tubing down on these and run it back up. The thing is, I don't want to undo these labels. I want those to remain permanent. There's a hell of a lot more wires here than there are here. So we're going to match our speaker pairs up. Positive and negative, like a color match pair is going to be a speaker pair that usually the positive is the actual color wire, the negative is going to be the one of the black stripe. I'm making that even more clear by color coding which heat shrink tubing I put on there. A lot more wires on this. We're going to splice together that which we can match up. We're going to see what's left over and how we're going to deal with it. Alright, so testing the radio real quick here. Alright, so basically what's going on is I plugged in the wiring harness that I was making out of what was else. We're going to pull this radio back out, and I wanted to double check and triple check the connections and make sure this thing is going to work before I finalize the installation. So there's enough slack on the cable to work with that. That's not really an issue. And I wanted to verify that we're all working. I verified the GPS connection and all of that. We're going to show a little bit more about how this got accomplished. Alright, so setting this up, these are the leftover wires. They had to do with other features such as steering wheel radio controls, the reverse light hookup, and some other things for the camera system. I'm not going to fully install the camera system at this time. What I am going to do is plug this cable in the back so that I don't have to run it later. Okay. Alright, rear stuff plugged in for reference. This is where the camera plugs in. I also not finding a lot of info in the instructions, but it looks like this is set up to take power. Now the camera is also set up to take power here. I don't think I need to transmit power all the way down the cord for that. I'm going to plug this in just so I have a point of reference for this, but this is where it goes. And the GPS is plugged in. I'm going to route that under the dash. I decided to put a USB extender on here so that when I plug something in the rear for the rear interface, I can reach into that a little bit more easily. This has to stay plugged in. The way this works on the Geo Metro, I cannot reach the back of the radio once it's in its location. So this is going to have to get threaded through part of the dash so that we can reach all that stuff. Well, this is how it's going to look going into its housing. We're going to show that next. So this is a very tight fit, so these screws are going to have to go. I'm using a little tape to keep the top and the bottom plate in place as this gets slid back. But once this gets all slid back, we're pretty much going to have a lot of reinforcement because of this metal plate here. Alright, what a fucking hassle. Okay, so even cutting those little screws away, taking some of the screws out of the housing here, wasn't really going to get this thing to slide on without making a relief cut in it. I just have the tape on there to hold it while it's going back in. We got screws here, we got screws on the bottom, I got screws on the side, I've got a tray that's going to hold this in. That's a hell of a lot more hardware, even with that relief cut, than what came with the radio. So I think we're going to be okay. All this stuff has to get fed through a corner in there. We're going to show that here in a second before it gets dark. Alright, so basically we're getting the trim plate back on. All the wires and cables, I basically plugged it in, kind of gently put it back. This does not have the trim ring on it, so in the morning I'm probably going to show how this looks installed. You don't need any additional installation kit with this radio if you're putting it in at least this body style or dashboard style on Geo Metro, the 93 model. All the other cables for all the other crap I fed to the rear. I'm going to feed those up under the dash wherever they're going to fit. One of them does eventually need to go to the trunk, but the GPS antenna is just going to go up under the dashboard. I'm going to get the trim ring on this, get a little more light in here, show you how it is done. Oh, another slick little feature you can do with this thing is you can stream content off the internet. Okay, and this is an old-ass Geo Metro. I mean, this is not a special car, but I can put my iPad or a smartphone up on a dash, stream content off the internet, and the audio will feed through the speakers. That's kind of a cool little thing with the Bluetooth connectivity. Although I ran into an issue with the audio on the GPS will interfere with the audio on my music playlist. So like there's a little voice on the GPS. There's stuff in the settings to deal with on that, but it's cool as a built-in Bluetooth connectivity. There's a microphone on here, and then the audio from my phone comes out over the stereo speakers, which is kind of cool.